Now, it's time during Science and the City to discover some aliens. But they're not aliens from space. But Professor David Mifsud, no, no, he's not the alien.
I hope not, I hope not.
But Professor David Mifsud and Arthur Lamolia, they're here with us for the next event during the Science and the City online festival, because we have some live events happening around Valletta as well, all the way till this evening. Now, Professor David Mifsud and Arthur Lamolia are here to tell us about alien species in the Maltese biodiversity field. Species that really shouldn't be in Malta, and because they have been introduced into our wildlife system, they're causing harm. They're not bad creatures themselves, but they shouldn't be where they are now. And that has happened by mistake or for various reasons that David and Arthur will explain to us very soon. And they're going to tell us all about the damage that's being done and perhaps some solutions as well, how we can help identify and eradicate them from our ecosystems. So, David and Arthur, can I leave it in your hands?
We'll try to do our best.
Fantastic.
Thanks so much, Colin. So, Arthur, where shall we start? So, practically people, we have, at the moment, we have a new project. It's me, Arthur, we have another 2 people involved in this project, and this project is precisely about alien species. You know, alien species that occur in the Maltese Islands, and we're trying to do something in order to solve some problems. We're not going to solve our problems because we are invaded with alien species, and we're going to tell you why sometimes this can be a problem. So, what is an alien species? An alien species is an organism that was accidentally or deliberately introduced into a new territory. All right? So let's take an example so that people can understand what we're talking about. Eucalyptus trees, all right? Or ficus trees, you know? After the Second World War, many European countries wanted to start afforestation programs. And they started to import trees from Australia because they know that trees, eucalyptus trees, are fast growing for afforestation programs. So these trees, you know, eucalyptus trees, are not native to the Maltese Islands, but they are native to Australia, all right? To Southeast Asia, ficus, you know? It is very important to know what is alien and what is indigenous, you know? And this is exactly what we try to do at the University of Malta. We're trying to sort out what is going on in this scenario. Arthur, will you tell us something about some alien species of plants? And I will talk about some alien species of animals.
Okay. So, if I may start, so as most of you may know, the Maltese Island is beautiful for its biodiversity. The number of plants is extremely high. There are many plants that are only found in the Maltese Islands, but there are also many plants that come from all over the world. They got imported during several episodes of colonization. They were introduced by misguided gardeners, by some actions over the past century, but even before that. So I would like to start by showing you a few of those. The most common one that you would find in the Maltese Islands. For example, we have the first one that comes to mind is the heaven tree. It's a really common one that you would find along the roads. You would find along some areas such as Busquet, where it has spread. So this is a tree coming from China that was introduced following some gardeners who exchanged seeds all over Europe, eventually landed in Malta. And this one is now spreading because of its high production of seeds or its high production of high production of seed and the production of rhizome and roots, which are extremely resistant to drought, and therefore provide them an advantage on the other species present, such as in Busquet, where it's taking the space. What you can see...
There, you have to look at that.
All right. So what you can see on this picture is another species, an invasive species. It's called the lead tree. The river tamarind as well, it's called. We call it Leucena leucocephala in Latin. This is another quite common feature nowadays. We think it has been established in Malta over the past century and has probably escaped some gardens because this is a tree that was really used into afforestation and ornamental purposes. On the right, you could see some seed pods, which form like really fragile structure that are really easily broken and disperse the seeds all over the place. Once you remove this, the mother plant, the seeds will still be able to grow and spread. And therefore, the dynamics of the reproduction of this plant is really high and will take over the native environment. Another species you might have found, it's quite a common feature as well nowadays, the century plant. I'm sure you have seen those by the side of roads, by the sides, even in natural areas. This is a plant that was originally coming from the south of the USA, New Mexico, this area. There are several species of agave growing over there, and unfortunately was introduced the last century in the Maltese Islands. So this plant doesn't even need seeds to reproduce. You see the structure you see growing on your right-hand side, they form a pole that creates miniature plantlets that would already be ready to produce a new plant. So once this pole is growing, at the end of the life of this plant, the plantlet will just be dispersed, and instead of having one plant, you would have about 2,000. Mm-hmm. So this is one plant, you have 2,000. Then you have 2,000 plants, and they already produce 2,000. Do you have an idea in 50 years' time how many plants you can produce that way? It's incredible. If you see in some areas, they are the only plant growing there are this century plant. It's absolutely taken all over the place. And there is no space, no resource, nothing left for the native flora to thrive. So that's a main issue. There is another one, again, that you might found on the side of the road quite often, the Castor Oil Tree, Ricinus communis, we call it in Latin. This one will thrive in valleys, where as well it will dislocate the other plants and remove them, push them further, and take their space, their resource, and everything. It produces a large amount of seeds, which are actually highly poisonous, so you shouldn't even get close to this plant. We believe this plant was introduced for ornamental purposes, but we cannot exclude it has been introduced accidentally. And we believe that it has been introduced several times in the Maltese Islands because we found actually different types, different morphology of this plant. It's originally coming from the tropical Africa, where it is not that spread, but once introduced to Malta, it has no real regulation in terms of biological regulation, no predator, no animals feeding on it, so it just spread without control. Last but not least, you would find a really common feature as well, the Pennisetum. You would see probably in quite many clay slopes and garrigues areas growing. This herb has just taken all the space, and you can see here on the left, there is nothing else much growing. What you have to keep in mind is all those plants, they come to the environment, they spread, and they cause damages, not only to the ecosystems, but as well to health and the economy. Some of these plants spreading in the field would destroy the crops. Some of these plants would be toxic or damaging for the human health. And those are estimated to cost billions to the world every year. They are the second cause of loss of biodiversity in the world. It's extremely important we take care of those, and we find solution to avoid this phenomenon. So that's enough about plants, I think. Aliens are not only plants. We've seen aliens are different types of organisms. Here I'll talk about plants, but maybe, David, can you tell us a bit more about your little friends here?
My insects, okay.
Yes.
We can. It is very important, people, to note that these alien organisms that come from one territory into a new territory, they not always find a suitable habitat in order to survive, okay? So, statistically speaking, only 15% of those organisms that are accidentally introduced into a new territory will actually establish, all right? And this is extremely good, because if all organisms that are introduced into a new territory are actually established, then it will be the end of natural biodiversity within that region. So this is very important. Okay, so let's go to some examples of insects which are aliens to the Maltese Islands. I think everyone, I don't know if the cameraman could actually focus on this beetle here, yes. So here we have 3 beetles, all right? I don't know whether they can enlarge them or not, but probably not. So this is here a beetle. It's called the red palm weevil, all right, the red palm weevil. And the red palm weevil was introduced in Malta in 2007, all right? So some 13 years ago, you know? And as its common name implies, all right, it is a pest of palm trees, all right? And since it was introduced in the Maltese Islands, it already decimated more than 7,000 palm trees, all right? The palm tree itself, it is also an alien species. However, the economic losses because of this pest was a big one in the Maltese Islands, you know? Let's talk about another organism that was also introduced in the Maltese Islands more than 20 years ago. So we can focus a bit on this here, yes. Okay, so this is centralized like this, okay. So here we have a group of beetles, and as you can see, they have long antennae, you know. So the antennae are even longer than their body. In fact, the common name of this group of beetles is Longhorn Beetles. Actually, they are now enlarged, and you can see them more thoroughly, okay? These beetles here, people, that we have, these come from Australia. They were accidentally introduced with eucalyptus plantations. In fact, these wood-boring insects, they are specific to eucalyptus. So they are, they bore only the wood of eucalyptus, all right? Usually, these type of organisms, they will only attack trees which are relatively sick, trees which are not 100% healthy, okay? So both the tree and both the parasite of the tree, both of them are alien species, and they are native to Australia. They are native to Australia. In this other box, people, I'm showing you some species of other longhorn beetles. Okay, here we are. Okay. So these are other longhorn beetles which have been accidentally introduced in our islands, but they were never established, you know. So they were introduced, only a couple of specimens. However, they didn't find a suitable environment to live in, you know. People found them once, and then they were never recorded again. So their establishment in the Maltese Islands was never asserted, okay? And I would say that I have a last example, people. I have a last example. Perhaps We can show them, yes. Okay. It's this species here. This is very interesting, people. This species was introduced in Malta 20 years ago. At that time, I was living in Switzerland, and a friend of mine sent me a couple of these specimens in order to identify them, you know. And I said to him, listen, this is definitely not something which is Maltese. This is for sure an introduced species. So at that time, I was working in various natural history museums around Central Europe, and finally, I managed to identify this species, you know. And I discovered that this species was actually native to Central Africa, to Cameroon, you know. So we were thinking, but why a species from Central Africa would end up in Malta, you know? So this was one of my big questions, you know? And then, after doing a lot of research, we found out that some people imported logs from Cameroon which were intended for the timber industry, you know? And inside these logs, inside this wood, we had a couple of specimens of this particular species. This beetle here, it's a Longhorn Beetle. The scientific name of it is Phereneta leprosa, you know? And in Africa, this beetle is a pest on many different species of trees. In Malta, this particular species specialized on just one particular tree, the black mulberry, you know, Morus nigra, all right? The Maltese Islands, we had many trees of Morus nigra for one simple reason, because some 100 years ago, there was a big project to start rearing silk moths in the Maltese Islands. So the Maltese Islands were quite full of this particular tree, you know. However, in 20 years, people, this beetle decimated more than 80% of the black mulberry trees, you know. So the economic damage that this beetle did to the Maltese Islands was a big one, you know. So this is why alien species should never be introduced into new territories, you know, because they are a big havoc to the natural environment of the Maltese Islands. If we have time, we will tell you the last story. Arthur, shall I leave it in your hands?
Sure.
So the last story is about these two babies here. They are telling us that we have 10 more minutes, Arthur. So you can relax and tell all the story about them.
So today, we had the chance to grab you some live specimens of crayfish. So these little guys that look like lobsters are actually thriving in fresh water. Those are aliens. We think they've been around for quite a few years, at least 5 years.
Yeah.
Provella has identified them 4 years ago in Chadwick Lakes, and they are still quite happy over there. So these are literally monsters. They are high-level predators. They would eat anything. When I say anything, they would eat anything. They are decomposers. They are eating dead material, dead species of plants. They would eat anything. They are barely, I think they are indestructible. They could live outside of the water. And they might be carrying some disease that may affect the threat. So now, if you've been to Chadwick Lakes recently, you might have noticed them on the banks of the river, for example, digging holes, even during summer. They are really doing really well. And over there, they've been completely eating out the frog population, for example. There is barely a frog alive over there. We tend to see some quite often, but not as many as we used to. They would eat themselves, they would eat their congeners, they would eat dead material, frogs, and the most important thing is that we have already identified them, we have already, we know where they live, they can survive, but the most important step now is to define what can we do, because it will be really hard to get rid of those. If you try to remove them from the environment, you will create a lot of damages as well. So, and if you're not taking all the specimens, you might have one pregnant female left over, for example, and just the population will create again. They might expand, invade new territories. We already know it has expanded to another valley. And we are not quite sure how these guys got there, but what we can tell for sure is some pet shops used to sell them some 10 years ago. They are really nice ornamental creatures. They look really good in your aquarium. And we believe someone just got tired of them and threw them in the water. So now, I hope you understood you should absolutely never do that, because the damage caused by these simple actions had consequences that can be hard to calculate. The damage caused to the environment, the cost of the restoration of those damage is absolutely enormous. And we don't know the limit. So these are questions we are trying to answer in our fight against live alien species. Where they are, what are they, and what can be done about them. We are currently working in 3 protected areas of the Natura 2000 network. We are working at Il Malou, we are working in Busquets, and next to Slendi Valley in Gozo. So what we are trying to identify here is the extent of the invasion, the number and the characterization of the invasive species present over there, and trying to find the best way to, even if we cannot eradicate them, to mitigate their impact on the local fauna and flora.
Yes.
Again, these places are absolutely beautiful in terms of biodiversity. And we believe that fighting the aliens in these places would be really beneficial for all the goods and services that those ecosystems provide to us humans. So, yes. You can follow up on the project. We have a Facebook page. We have a website. We'll try to keep you posted as much as possible on the progress. So feel free to follow us, and you will learn more about the probably new species that we might find in those places.
Well, that was very, very informative, and I'd just like to ask, if anybody has any doubts, perhaps, as you said, they have an aquarium, they have some exotic creatures which they bought from a pet shop, and they need to get rid of them, and they want to ask a question. Could they contact the Facebook page you mentioned, or could they get some advice? Where can we get advice when we are faced with a situation where we have a creature, perhaps in our possession, and now we know that it's not right to just throw it away, flush it down the toilet or whatever. Can people ask what to do and get advice on how to proceed when they are at that juncture?
Absolutely. I mean, you can reach out to several people. Feel free to reach out to us through the Facebook page, but if you find something that you're not sure about, you can still contact the ERA, the Environmental Authority. They have dedicated teams working on the subject, and they recently issued many guidelines on how to handle those species and how to mitigate, how to contain them, and even avoid invasion, new invasion. So you should definitely reach out to them if you have any doubts.
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. So the sites you mentioned, and we encourage you to find out more. Natura 2000, there's this project. Yes. The ERA, the Environment and Resources Authority. Check out their website, find out more. The University of Malta's department, which specific department?
Well, we have this project, which is called FAST, you know. So in this FAST, you will find our website there. and you can ask us whatever you like, and we will reach you immediately.
So how can they just search FAST?
It's fast, you know, and,
Fast
and
Malta,
they, will,
F-A-S-T.
they will immediately find us.
Excellent. So find out more about everything that's been said here this afternoon via those sources of information. And obviously, when you are walking in the countryside, in these lovely valleys, among Malta's ecosystem and biodiversity, always respect the countryside nature. Do not litter. And try and find out about the fauna and fauna, because it's very exciting.
Yes,
As Arthur said at the beginning, it's very beautiful, and there's a big, big variation of life here in Malta, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, we are doing a checklist of all the insects of Malta, and I mean, it's amazing. You know, we have more than 5,000 different species, you know, which is incredible. However, if we are going to leave all these aliens to establish themselves in all the natural places in Malta, these 5,000 species will immediately reduce by half the number in less than 10 years, you know.
Absolutely.
So we don't want this, you know. We want that future generations enjoy what we are enjoying right now.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Professor David Mifsud. And Arthur, I'm going to have to look at my script for your surname. Arthur, all the way from France, you're doing work in Malta. Are you enjoying it?
So much. There are so many things to see. It's absolutely beautiful. So yeah, looking forward to carry on exploring.
And I hope I can say your surname properly in French, Lamolia.
Correct.
Yes.
Perfect.
Arthur Lamolia.
Perfect surname.
Together with Professor David Mifsud. It's been wonderful, and we've learned so much about alien species in our ecosystem, how they got here, and also what to do about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.